General Hospital spoilers teased that beneath the heavy skies of Port Charles, a deafening silence had settled inside Dante and Lulu's home. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the kind of silence that wrapped around the walls like a curse, suffocating, ominous, and loud in its stillness. Every tick of the clock, every creak of the floor, and every whisper of the wind against the window felt like an alarm bell screaming one terrifying truth: Rocco was gone. And not just gone in the sense of having slipped out for air, he had vanished, disappeared without a note, a text, a goodbye. 1 minute, he was there, confused and angry after discovering a fragment of a truth that was never meant to be uncovered. The next, he had dissolved into the early morning mist like a ghost running from a life he no longer recognized. The night before had been tense. Rocco, now old enough to question everything, had stumbled across a medical document buried at the back of a drawer, an old file referencing embryo theft, surrogate complications, and the name Britt Westbourne scrawled in clinical ink. It was the key that unlocked a door he didn't even know existed, a gateway into a world where he wasn't the product of love and trust, but the result of betrayal and stolen science. He had confronted his parents, Lulu and Dante, with wide, disbelieving eyes and a question that pierced deeper than any knife: am I even really your son? Lulu's hand trembled as she dropped the spoon she'd been stirring with. Dante's voice caught in his throat, a rare moment of speechlessness from a man trained to lead under pressure. They tried to explain, haltingly, desperately, that none of this changed anything. That he was theirs, wholly and unquestionably, that he had always been loved, always belonged. But their words felt hollow, too late, like patching a dam after the flood had already swept everything away. Rocco didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply shut down, withdrew into himself, and retreated behind the blank stare of someone who no longer trusted the people he'd once called his world. By dawn, he was gone. Lulu had been the first to notice. She opened his door expecting the usual mess of blankets and comic books, but instead found a neatly made bed and an empty room. The closet had been disturbed. A backpack was missing. The panic was instant, primal. She screamed his name into the hallway, raced outside barefoot, called Dante before even fully registering the horror of it all. Within the hour, Dante, still in uniform, was issuing an APB. Officers were briefed. Photos were circulated. But nothing seemed to lead anywhere. That was when Dante remembered Gio Palmieri had only recently learned that he wasn't the biological son of the parents who raised him. The discovery had shattered his world. He had run too, straight into the arms of uncertainty, seeking solace in the only person who made him feel seen, Emma Scorpio Drake. It wasn't hard for Dante to draw the connection. Gio, like Rocco, had spiraled into emotional chaos upon discovering that everything he believed about his origins was a lie. Dante didn't know if Gio could help. But he knew that Gio might be the only person who truly understood what Rocco was feeling. When Dante tracked Gio down and asked for his help, there was hesitation. Gio hadn't fully forgiven Dante for what had happened between them. Their relationship, fragile and tense, was far from a foundation of trust. But when he saw the desperation in Dante's eyes, when he heard the tremble in his voice as he admitted, "I can't find my son," something inside Gio shifted. He nodded. Not out of duty, but because he knew what it was like to feel like a mistake. For 2 days, Gio searched. He retraced places he himself had run to, quiet train stations, bus terminals, abandoned parks, shelters. Motels that didn't ask too many questions. He showed Rocco's picture to anyone who would look. He followed instincts more than logic. Still, there was nothing. Then, on the second evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the city in a melancholy orange, Gio remembered something. A small church on the outskirts of town. Rocco had once sketched it in a notebook, an escape. A quiet place he'd never visited but dreamed about. Gio went there. And there he found him. Rocco sat on the steps, knees drawn to his chest, hoodie pulled over his head. A shadow of the boy who had once sprinted through those apartment halls laughing about cereal choices. His eyes were swollen, his voice barely audible. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said, staring straight ahead. Gio sat beside him, not saying anything at first. The silence stretched between them like a bridge. And then, finally, Gio spoke, calm, steady, honest. "I didn't either. But I figured out that you don't need to know all the answers. You just need to know who's willing to show up for you." There was no epiphany, no dramatic embrace. But Rocco didn't get up and run. He listened. He let the words land. When Dante and Lulu arrived an hour later, racing through the church parking lot like people rising from the dead, the tears came like a flood. They held Rocco as though they'd never let go again, whispering apologies, promises, and silent prayers that it wasn't too late. But the most miraculous thing wasn't just that they found him. It was that Gio had been the one to bring him back. The boy who had once been cast aside, misunderstood, now stood between a broken family and the edge of despair, and became their salvation. In the days that followed, conversations unfolded slowly. Rocco wasn't ready to forget, maybe not even to fully forgive. But he was home. And more importantly, he had a brother now, not just biologically, but emotionally. Joe's actions had changed something fundamental. Dante, who once only saw Gio through the lens of his own regrets, began to open up. Lulu, who had quietly supported Gio even when he didn't trust her, now saw the makings of a son in the boy she barely knew a month ago. But while healing began for the Falconeri family, elsewhere in Port Charles, the ripples of Rocco's disappearance were far from over. Brooklyn Quartermain, who had recently poked into Brit's files and brought the truth of Rocco's conception to the surface, was beginning to feel the backlash. Her good intentions had exploded in her face. She had hoped to bring clarity, maybe even closure, but instead had lit the match that nearly burned a family to the ground. Now, she watched from afar as Dante avoided her calls. As Lulu's once cordial words became clipped, distant. And Gio? He wouldn't even look at her. Not because he hated her, but because her actions reminded him of how fragile trust truly was. One revelation, one moment of carelessness, had almost cost him a brother he hadn't even had time to know. And yet, even through all the chaos, something remarkable had emerged. A new family unit, flawed, fractured, but real. Dante, Lulu, Gio, and Rocco. 4 people learning to rebuild what had been shaken, not by pretending the past didn't matter, but by acknowledging that the present was still theirs to shape. Because sometimes, the most powerful kind of family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one forged in the fire, tempered by loss, strengthened by forgiveness, and held together by the simple, unwavering decision to stay. The story unfolding in Port Charles has taken a darker, more emotionally charged turn, one that centers around a profound transformation in Gio Palmieri and the shifting gravity of his role within the Falconeri family. Once on the fringes of familial recognition, Gio has found himself drawn deeper into the fabric of Dante's life, no longer just a boy with a mysterious past, but now a son, a brother. And increasingly, a moral compass during times of crisis. His presence has become a stabilizing force in a household teetering on the edge of emotional ruin. But as Joe's sense of belonging strengthens, so too does his capacity for disillusionment, and nothing has shaken him more than the mounting realization that Lulu may have been hiding painful truths not only from him, but from Rocco. The brother Gio fought so hard to protect. Gio had once believed that pain and betrayal were things you carried alone. But after witnessing Rocco's spiral into confusion and disappearance, and then leading the charge to bring him home, Gio began to understand the weight of shared grief and fractured truths. His relationship with Dante deepened in the process. A fragile but real bond emerging through their joint efforts to salvage what had been nearly lost. Lulu, too, began to represent something new to Gio, not just a figure from a troubled past, but a maternal presence who seemed willing to accept him without condition. For a while, it seemed the darkness was lifting, that perhaps Gio had found the beginnings of a true family. But that illusion could not last. The moment Gio discovered that Lulu had known the full extent of Rocco's origins long before the boy ever asked, had made a calculated choice to bury the truth rather than face it, something in him snapped. It wasn't just about the lie. It was about the fear that history was repeating itself. Just as Gio had once been denied the truth about who he was, Rocco had now suffered the same fate. And the one person Gio had begun to trust, Lulu, had been complicit in the very silence that almost tore him apart. The realization festered into something darker, something more volatile. Joe's sense of betrayal was not simply rooted in anger, it was born from the haunting thought that maybe, in this family, truth was something only selectively granted. And if Lulu could lie to Rocco, who else might she lie to? Had she truly accepted Gio, or had he simply become another secret she hoped wouldn't explode? Joe's internal torment didn't erupt in a scream or an argument. It simmered beneath the surface, subtle but poisonous, like smoke seeping through cracks in the walls. He became quieter around Lulu, his eyes colder, his responses clipped. Dante noticed, of course, but misread the shift as a symptom of Joe's lingering discomfort from the chaos with Rocco. Only later would he begin to understand that the root of Joe's withdrawal came from something much deeper, a burgeoning obsession with truth. And a growing resentment toward anyone who dared withhold it. This wasn't just anger. It was the reawakening of a trauma Gio had tried to bury, the memory of being lied to about his origins. Of being shuffled through systems and whispered about behind closed doors, of never knowing where he belonged. The idea that Lulu, a woman he had started to admire, could perpetuate that same pattern with Rocco cut deeper than Gio was willing to admit. He felt used. Manipulated into playing the part of the supportive older brother, while being left in the dark about the very truths that shaped that relationship. His sense of identity, still fragile, began to fracture again under the weight of this realization. And so, Gio began to fixate, not just on Lulu's betrayal, but on uncovering every truth she had buried. It was no longer enough to rebuild the family. He needed to understand what had been hidden, what had been twisted, and what had been denied to both him and Rocco. His presence in the Falconeri household grew colder, more analytical. He started asking questions no one was prepared to answer. Why had Lulu kept quiet about the embryo theft? Why had she allowed Rocco to believe in a reality that was built on silence and omission? And most importantly, if she had hidden this, what else was she capable of hiding? The obsession took root. Gio began quietly collecting pieces, records, names, fragments of old files left in dusty boxes, phone calls that he pretended were casual. But every bit of information was a thread. And Gio was determined to pull every one until the entire web of secrets unraveled. It wasn't revenge he sought. It was clarity. He told himself that if he could understand the full truth, he could finally find peace. But what he didn't realize was that in chasing those shadows, he was beginning to mirror the very pain he had endured, inflicting distance, suspicion, and fear on a family that had only just begun to heal. Lulu, for her part, sensed the shift. She tried to reach out, but her words no longer landed with the same warmth. Gio no longer trusted her smiles, no longer believed in her reassurances. Every kind gesture now felt like a tactic, every soft-spoken promise a manipulation. Even Rocco, slowly recovering from his own ordeal, began to notice the strain. The bond they had begun to build was cracking, not from malice, but from a growing chasm between forgiveness and truth. And yet, amid all of this, Dante found himself caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to Lulu and the growing bond with the son who had once hated him. He saw the pain in Joe's eyes and recognized it as something he had once carried himself. But he also saw Lulu struggling, cornered by guilt and fear, trying to protect a child and losing another in the process. Dante knew the storm would not pass easily. And what terrified him most was the possibility that in trying to save one child from heartbreak, they had driven another deeper into obsession. Because Gio wasn't just angry, he was haunted. Haunted by the thought that love in this family came with conditions. Haunted by the belief that transparency was something earned, not given. And haunted by the possibility that, No matter how much he gave, he might never be fully seen or trusted. The adjustments within the falconry household had once promised redemption and rebirth. But now they threatened to unleash a new kind of chaos, one born not from violence or tragedy, but from silence and omission. In the weeks to come, Port Charles may witness a shift far more dangerous than any external threat. Because obsession, when born from betrayal, rarely burns out quietly. And Gio, once a boy yearning for connection, may soon become the very force that fractures the fragile unity he helped create. Unless someone finds the courage to tell him everything, completely, honestly, and without filters, he may never stop chasing the ghosts of deception. And when a soul as wounded as Joe's begins to believe that truth is a weapon, not a gift, the collateral damage can be unimaginable. In the end, the question remains, will this family survive the price of their secrets? Or has the time for healing passed, leaving only the echoes of unspoken truths and the haunting presence of what might have been? In the shifting landscape of Port Charles, one of the most unexpected developments is unfolding quietly, powerfully, and with rippling emotional consequence. The evolution of Giovanni Gio Palmieri from a lost boy into the emotional center of the falconry family. What began as a slow, tentative integration into the lives of Dante and Lulu has now transformed into something much deeper, something far more significant. Gio is no longer just a reluctant son or a half-acknowledged sibling. He is becoming the glue that holds together a family teetering on the edge of collapse. His desire to foster unity is not performative. It is visceral. Every gesture, every effort he makes, stems from a place of aching sincerity. And in that sincerity lies a powerful force of change, a force that is growing stronger with each passing day. But as Gio works tirelessly to stitch together what has long been unraveling, an undercurrent of dread begins to rise. Because underneath this hopeful transformation lies a dark truth, one that Lulu has fought for years to keep buried. And Gio, driven by both compassion and his obsession with truth, is getting closer to uncovering it. There is a storm brewing inside Gio that he doesn't fully recognize. His fixation on healing is noble, but it is also born of trauma. Gio knows what it means to be cast aside. He knows what it feels like to have the truth of your identity ripped away without consent. And that knowledge haunts him. It fuels his determination to make sure Rocco never feels the same kind of abandonment. Gio believes, deeply and perhaps naively, that if he can just hold the pieces of this family together, everything will be okay. That if he shows up, if he gives love without condition, if he proves himself over and over again, the ghosts of betrayal won't return. But this kind of relentless hope comes with a cost, especially when the person you're trying to protect is being lied to by someone you're trying to trust. Lulu, in many ways, has welcomed Gio with cautious optimism. She sees his value, his growth, and she's grateful that he was there when Rocco disappeared, grateful that he saved her son in ways no one else could. But Lulu is also scared. Terrified, in fact. Because she knows something Gio doesn't. Something that, if revealed, could detonate the fragile balance they've all fought so hard to preserve. The truth is, Lulu has not been entirely honest with either of her sons. There are deeper layers to Rocco's origin story, layers that go beyond what Dante and Gio even suspect. Mistakes were made. Secrets were kept. And Lulu, in her maternal desperation to protect Rocco from pain, chose silence over truth. But that silence has become a ticking time bomb, and Gio can feel it. He doesn't have all the facts yet, but he knows something is wrong. He can see it in Lulu's eyes, in the way her hands tremble when he talks about his childhood. In the way she avoids direct answers when Rocco asks too many questions. And that unspoken tension is becoming unbearable. Gio is haunted by the idea that Rocco, like himself, may have been raised under the illusion of security, only to one day learn that everything he believed was a carefully constructed lie. And if Lulu, the woman who promised him honesty and acceptance, is complicit in that lie, then what does that mean for everything Gio is trying to build? This internal conflict is driving Gio to the edge of obsession. He starts going through old files, questioning family members, piecing together fragments of conversations. It's not rage that fuels him. It's fear. The fear that everything he's fighting for, a connected, unified family, may be built on a foundation that's already cracked beyond repair. He doesn't want to destroy what they have. But he refuses to be the blindfolded boy again. He refuses to allow Rocco to become a casualty of the same kind of betrayal that shaped his own life. Meanwhile, Lulu feels the pressure mounting like a vice around her chest. Every day, Joe's presence becomes both a comfort and a threat. He is kind. He is thoughtful. He is exactly the kind of older brother Rocco needs. But he is also inquisitive, intuitive, and increasingly suspicious. Lulu finds herself spiraling into a state of emotional paralysis. How much longer can she maintain the illusion? How much longer before Gio finds out everything? And when he does, what will become of them? The thought of losing Joe's trust terrifies her. Not just because she has come to care for him, but because she sees in him a mirror of every choice she made, every truth she buried, every risk she took in the name of love. And now, that mirror is reflecting something she can't bear to face. The possibility that in trying to protect one son, she may end up losing both. The pressure begins to erode her from the inside. Her sleep becomes erratic. Her smiles grow brittle. Her voice trembles during even the most mundane conversations. Every knock at the door makes her heart lurch. She begins to anticipate the moment Gio will confront her. She sees it in his eyes, that unspoken question, the silent demand for transparency. And each time she withholds the truth, she feels herself inching closer to the edge of a devastating fallout. Because Gio is not the same boy he was when he arrived in their lives. He is stronger, smarter, and far less forgiving. What Gio doesn't realize is that the more he tries to mend the family, the more Lulu feels herself unraveling. His good intentions, his kindness, his patience, his efforts to protect Rocco, are all things that should bring them together. But instead, they are magnifying Lulu's guilt. Every moment of warmth from Gio becomes a reminder of what's at stake. And Lulu knows that the truth cannot remain hidden forever. When it comes out, and it always does, she will not only have to answer to Rocco and Dante, but to Gio most of all. And that confrontation will not be gentle. It will be the reckoning of a young man who has learned to speak not with rage, but with calm, piercing disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than any shout ever could. There is a new kind of obsession rising within this family. Not the violent, reckless kind, but the kind born from unspoken pain, unresolved wounds, and the desperate need to define what family truly means. Joe's growing role within the Falconeri household is reshaping everyone around him. He is a stabilizing presence, but also an emotional force that cannot be ignored. Lulu feels it like a storm on the horizon. She fears it like a mother fears the moment her child realizes she's not perfect. If the truth is revealed, Gio may walk away. Not in anger, but in devastation. And if he does, Lulu will not just lose a son. She will lose the very foundation she has been clinging to in the wake of years of loss and regret. That is the nightmare that wakes her at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she made the wrong choices at every turn. And so the question remains, how long can Gio continue to build bridges while walking over landmines? How long can Lulu maintain the facade before the weight of her silence crushes her completely? The Falconeri family is in the midst of a transformation, one fueled by hope, love, guilt, and obsession. And at the heart of it all stands Gio, a young man who only wanted to belong, now carrying the power to either hold his family together or shatter it entirely.